afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work-study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council workshop session of October 8th, 2024. The meeting is called to order. I will not do an attendance roll call because everybody's here. So if you would make note of that, that'd be awesome. So with that, Ms. Morano, if you would go ahead, Moreno, if you'd go ahead and introduce item number 1 for us.
Updates to City Code, Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 2, Purchasing Procedures.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide staff report this afternoon will be led by Amy Lindsay, our Assistant Director of Budget and Finance, and she'll be joined by Connie Schneider, who is our Procurement Administrator for the city. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. There we go. We are pleased to be here today to discuss some proposed updates to the City Code with regards to purchasing procedures. So first, why are these changes needed? The changes to the City Code are needed for a few reasons. The last comprehensive update to the purchasing procedures in the City Code occurred back in 2001. Changes address the increase in the cost of goods from 2001 to 2024. $50,000 in 2001 is now worth over $88,000. Like cities across the valley have higher spending thresholds than Glendale, and efficiencies could be realized with increasing the spending thresholds for small and large procurements. And the update also clarifies the process for receiving bids for real property, land, buildings, etc. from goods and services. Increasing the spending threshold requiring council approval to anything $100,000 or more is consistent with other peer cities in the valley, as you can see on this slide. We received an audit recommendation to gain efficiency through increasing the spending threshold. The staff recommendation is to increase the threshold for informal procurements from $5,000 to $10,000 and formal procurements from $50,000 to $100,000. Okay, we're moving on to slide 4, which I have a slide that's missing. The overview of the proposed changes. So this goes into the actual changes within the code. Section 2:137 are the types of procurements that are exempt from the procurement code. Section 2:138 adds the definition of city real property. And Section 2:139 changes the title. We changed the title of materials manager to finance director throughout the code. The finance director has been the designated materials manager for quite some time. Both Vicky Rios and Lisette Camacho were the materials managers while they were the finance directors for the city, and Levi Gibson is currently the materials manager. This change in the code removes the need to designate a new materials manager when there is turnover in the finance director position. This next slide goes over the change to the formal purchase procedure, Section 2:145. The formal purchase procedure changes the dollar threshold for formal procurement and council approval of contracts valued at $100,000 or more. It's currently $50,000. Limits routine contracts for goods and services to a 5-year term, but this excludes linking agreements, legal services, construction, and real property contracts, which are addressed elsewhere in the code. It also gives council discretion to grant a longer term for contracts. The next changes in the code are for the formal purchase procedure, Section 2:145. It adds procedures for protesting a bid. These procedures were previously listed in the Finance Administrative Policy, which is kept internally within the Budget and Finance Department and is updated regularly. We often refer to it as the FAP. These are now listed in the City Code. There's a longer period to appeal and provides for a hearing within the defined procedure. And small purchases are now defined at less than $10,000. Previously, they were less than $5,000. This next slide goes through continued changes in the code. Section 2, 149, the finance director can amend linking agreements to remain consistent with the originating agency's agreement if that agreement is amended. Section 2, 152, suspension and debarment procedure was previously listed in the Financial Administrative Policy, also known as the FAP, and has now been added to the city code. And Section 2, 156, the city manager's approval authority is increased to less than $100,000, basically $99,999.99. Section 2, 155 addresses construction contracts. It adds Title 34 information to the city code, and this information, or these types of contracts are currently delegated to the engineering department. Section 2, 166 through Section 2, 170, the city council can decide to sell real property however they deem appropriate. They can request bids, use a real estate agent, accept an unsolicited bid, etc. They do not have to use a competitive bidding process. This section now also clarifies that if you were to use an RFP or an IFB, you can still negotiate the final terms of that agreement. And if the city decides to use the formal purchasing procedures of Section 2, 145 to solicit bids for sale of any real property, the city shall follow those procedures as it would for any other bid solicitation or award. Section 2, 171 and Section 2, 173 address personal property. It gives the finance director ability to sell off surplus with an original value of less than $100,000. Anything with an originating value over $100,000 still requires council approval. An example of this would be if we wanted to sell a fire truck. The original cost would be more than $100,000, so the sale of the fire truck would still require council approval. And with that, we can answer any questions that you may have.
I want you to clarify that very last thing that you said. So if a fire truck costs $1 million and we're selling it for $50,000, that approval is still required because of the original cost?
Mayor, members of the council, that's correct. It's based off of the original price of the item that was purchased.
That seems draconian a little bit to me, but all right. Question?
Yes, I have several, so please bear with me. My first question refers to page 5, section 2, 143, modification of contracts, and it allows the finance director, after consultation with the city attorney, can add, amend, modify, or delete existing to the city's standard contractual terms. I have no problem with that, but in an effort to keep council fully informed, I am suggesting that when the finance director does make modifications, additions, deletions, etc., that it inform council of what those changes have been. So that is one item that I think will require further discussion. Then on page 8, section 2, 145D3, proposers shall be accorded fair treatment with respect to any opportunity for discussion and revision of proposals, and such revisions may be permitted after submissions and before a notice of intent to award is issued. I don't understand that at all, and so I would ask for an explanation of that particular instance. I'm just going to give you my list of questions and then you can answer. Then on page 10, section 2, 146, under B, finance director in consultation with the city manager and city attorney shall establish procedures for informal procurements. Again, that is something that I think that city council should see. so that if they have any questions as to what these informal procedures are, or procurements are and the procedures for them, we at least are informed and know what criteria you're using. And then my last two are with regard to the 5 years. You know I love 5 years. So, again, and this is something I will admit the city attorney or city manager just told me. So I just learned it today, is that there is a provision within the contract that if they don't meet the criteria or whatever the reason is, the city has a right to terminate. But I didn't know that. So for 5 years, I've been saying that there's no way you can respond to market conditions. And now, as I'm about to leave, I'm finding out you do have a way. So thank you very much for that one. And then lastly, the $100,000 limit. It's been $50,000 for years and years and years. I think the whole time I've been on council, it's been $50,000. I understand your intent and that there is no nefarious plot to raise it to $100,000. I know that you are doing it in terms of greater efficiency, but you have to weigh greater efficiency against transparency. And by raising it to $50,000, council is no longer aware of, will no longer be aware of many contracts that are approved that are in that $50,000 to $100,000 range. It also does not afford the public an opportunity to learn about these contracts as well. So I would rather keep the limit at $50,000, even though it aggravates you because the limit's so low and it doesn't give you the efficiency you require. I would rather weigh down on the side of transparency than efficiency. Now you can respond to my questions. I hope you wrote them all down.
I did.
Good.
Mayor, members of the council, so Councilmember Clark, your first question about amending the contract and having council be notified of that, I wrote that down. Again, this is your code, so it's at your discretion as to how you want this to show up in the code. So if we make amendments to contracts and you guys, want a list of things that have been amended or notification that things have been, we can do that.
I think that keeps council informed. I think it's important to do that.
Your second question was Section 2, 145 about proposers with be accorded fair treatment. That gives people that are putting in bids an opportunity to do a best and final, which is part of the current process. So basically, we receive bids, those bids are scored, we go through a scoring process. Sometimes people are interviewed. There's a process that we go through, and then at the very end of that process, we reach out to everybody that's put in a bid and said, okay, give us your best and final price. And so that's part of the current procedure.
So let me ask a follow-up question regarding that. Do these people that make bids, these companies that make bids, do they know what their competitors have bid by this point? No?
Mayor, members of the council, no, they do not.
Okay. All right. So if, do you meet with these bidders one-on-one before they submit their final bid?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, we have pre-offer meetings with people that have put in bids.
So is it possible that you can suggest that they might want to modify A, B, or C in their bid and that they might have a better experience with the city if they were to do so?
So, Mayor and
Can you speak up, please?
sorry, can you hear me okay?
Just pull the mic closer.
Okay. So, the pre-offer meeting is strictly for those vendors who are planning to bid. We don't have any of their proposal information at that time.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Continue, please.
Oh, were you done? Or did you have more? Was there any more answers to her questions? Okay.
Mayor, members, yes, she had, I think I have 2 more answers
Okay.
that she was
All right,
looking
go
for.
ahead. Sorry about that.
The informal purchase procedures was the discussion about the limit of $100,000. You know, again, this is, it's at council's discretion what that threshold is. So we had an audit finding in an audit that was done back in 2023 where the specific audit finding was that based on analysis of peer data, the city's current thresholds for small purchases and formal procurements are set at a lower point than the majority of peer cities analyzed. The city should consider whether efficiencies could be gained by raising the small purchase threshold, which is currently $5,000, and the formal procurement threshold, which is currently $50,000. So this recommendation is based on that audit finding. But again, it's council's discretion what's in the code. So, you know, it's up to you guys. And then I think that's all I had.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. To to piggyback off of Joyce's or Councilmember Clark's concerns regarding the $100,000 limit, I can see the practicality of raising it and just helping things go more quickly and all. But I think that her solution that she proposed for the amendments to linking agreement contracts would be the solution to this question as well, in that we would get a regular, say, monthly report of the contracts that are signed or the expenditures under the $100,000 limit, so that we can see, you know, if something, you know, causes us concern or we just have a question about it, so that we can do our jobs better. Then we have a report that we can look at monthly, just to see those things if we're, you know, for those of us that are interested in it, send it out to every council member. I know some other cities in the valley do that, or I'm told that other cities in the valley do that, and I think that would be a good check and balance, or for us, if we're going to raise the limit, then we should get a monthly report. Thank you on that. And then the other question I have is, and it may be self-evident, you know, I think we all understand real property is real estate. Personal property would, as was mentioned, would actually be like a fire truck or furniture and things like that. That which is not land and buildings itself, I guess. Is there any other category of property that we use, or is everything defined as either real property or personal property as far as the city's concerned?
Mayor, members of the council, I guess I'll answer that question. As far as procurement is concerned, yes, those 2 categories cover real property is land and any improvements on it, so that would be buildings and those types of things, and personal property is whatever is not real property.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the 5,000 to 10,000 for competitive bids, I fully agree with that. Within my council office, there's been times where there's been projects that we would like to do for using my discretionary funds for improvements in my district, and these competitive bids sometimes have caused in those lower dollar values, sometimes you just can't get enough people to competitively bid, and you're kind of stuck because you have to go through that process. So I'm fully in agreement with that. And we're increasing it from 5,000 to 10,000, again, to make it more efficient. One question I have regarding the increase to 100,000 for the city manager approval, do we know how many contracts per year this would probably involve?
Mayor, members of the council, as a matter of fact, I do have that number. So far in 2024, that would have applied to 13 contracts between $50,000 and $100,000.
Okay. And do you know how many are under the 50,000?
Mayor, members of the council, I do not have that number in front of me, but I can get that information to you.
Okay. Again, my point is, you know, we have had some serious inflation. We've had, it's been 25 years or so, as I recall from the discussion, since we've increased this. I don't have a problem with increasing that to 100,000 because equivalently, we trusted the city manager 25 years ago at $50,000. And that same project now probably costs close to $100,000. So we're saying, oh, we trusted you 25 years ago, but we don't trust you today. That's basically what we're saying. We don't think it's transparent enough. I believe with just that many contracts, it'd be very easy for the city manager or the accounting office to provide us, as was stated, some sort of monthly or quarterly report saying these are their contracts, so that there is some a little bit more transparency. I think that's a good solution, but I would support increasing this to $100,000. Thank you.
Based on the comments of Councilmember Turner and Councilmember Malnar, I would be comfortable in raising the limit to 100,000 with the provision that monthly reports were provided to council in that no man's land between 50 and 100,000. So if you will commit to doing that, then I can support 100,000.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on I'm on the wrong page. The real property, the processes for real property on page 16. Does that align, because we have an existing policy on city-owned property. So I just want to make sure that what this says aligns with our existing policy on city-owned property, because I don't remember how many years ago it was, but we came up with a policy about notifying the public and these other issues that we do. So, but does this align with our policy on city-owned property?
Mayor, members of the council, I believe it does. This was a specific section that was requested to be added by the city attorney's office. And so they're the expert on that. If Michael Bailey would like to, I could defer that question to him, but I do believe it does, yes.
Mayor, Council, that is correct. There's notice requirements. We also continue to have the notice requirements in the charter as well. This aligns with what we have already in charter and in code.
So, thank you for that. So I guess my question is, so this would still provide the full transparency that we were looking for when we adopted the city-owned property policy. It wouldn't change the amount of transparency to the public on property that they own.
Mayor and Council, no, because and keep in mind that there's layers of policy there. There's your code, there's your charter, and then there's your policy in terms of how you operate with regards to, I would say, managing a purchase or sale of property. And so they all align, yes.
Okay, thank you. I do have one other question, and this probably is not but what is the difference? I see informal procurement. Is there a regular, everyday, or a formal and an informal procurement, or what is the difference? I'd like to understand that.
Yes, thank you. The formal procurements are currently anything over 50,000, and those are solicited.
So, Mayor, if I could, so that basically what this is doing is making anything under 100 informal and anything over 100
right.
formal. Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. That's it, Mayor, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I would ask that council support the idea of monthly reports for anything over 50,000, between that $50,000 and $100,000 range. So I would like us to give consensus for that idea.
Yeah, so before we go there, my question, I think you said that there's currently 13 that have been done in basically 10 months. Was there any month where there was 5 or 6, and maybe some months that we had 0?
Mayor, members of the council, I have the numbers by year for previous years. They average somewhere between 20 and 35. It's not a huge number. So there could potentially be months where there isn't a contract between $50,000 and $100,000, so we wouldn't have anything to report to council.
Okay, so, and I don't necessarily have an issue with the report. What I have an issue with is if there's not a report necessary, that you have to generate a report saying there's not a report. So if would be a simple way that you can say there's nothing to report this month, then all of us know that, no problem. If there is something, then we get it. I don't know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mayor, members of council, I think, again, we can certainly generate that. I'd recommend, rather than monthly, is maybe give a quarterly report just because of the actual numbers of that. And I think that we can then plug that into our system, and then we know at least every quarter there'll be something to report out. So that would be maybe something for the council to entertain, the report to be generated quarterly rather than monthly.
Quarterly is fine.
I do have a question. I was just going to suggest that. I think that's a very good idea. I also, so under our, and I forget what the name of it is, but our open data source. So these reports would be also available to the public under our open data platform. Is that?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, that's correct.
Okay, very good. I support it. Thank you.
Okay, so consensus to everything except for the additional quarterly reporting. That, yeah, we have a consensus for that. What else you need from us?
As long as we have consensus to move forward with the changes to the code, I think we're good.
Yeah, with that one addition, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, very good,
Thank you very much.
Okay, are you presenting number 2 or is that someone else? Okay.
And Mayor, members of the council, I just want to, she's not able to be here today, but just Nancy Mangone in the city attorney's office put a lot of work into this, and so just want to acknowledge her work as well. Again, this is a fairly detailed amount of, kind of understanding state code and other things. So again, she wasn't able to be here today, but she did put a lot of work into this as well. And with that, our next presentation will be read into.
Item 2, East Side Development Plan.
Mayor, members of council, here to provide staff report will be our Director of Transportation, Shabita Boss.
Thank you, City Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor Wires and the Council. My name is Shahid Abbas, Director of Transportation. Today I am here with Matt Quick from Kaufman Associates to present to you major highlights of the recently completed draft, the East Side Development Plan. As you know, the City of Glendale owns and operates its own airport. The good news is that the city's airport has recently been reclassified from municipal to regional airport and is categorized as a reliever airport by the Federal Aviation Administration, just a step lower than general purpose commercial airports. The city airport serves full range of general aviation operations and experiences high levels of aircraft activity, including jets and turboprops. Our airport is given a regional role because of its ability to support regional economies by connecting customers to the region and national markets. Our airport is a top-notch facility, easily accessible and ideally positioned in the west quadrant of the greater Phoenix metropolitan area. There is about 120-acre vacant parcel of airport land that lies on the east side of the existing runway. The city recognizes the value the airport brings to the city and the region. And in line with the overall economic development plans, the city would like to see this space developed to the fullest extent practical. Therefore, to create a tangible and realistic development plan for the east side of the airport, the city initiated a study in the year 2022. The key elements of the study are construction of a taxiway on the east side of the existing runway. Construction of a taxiway is critical for the development of the parcel of land. The good news, the total cost expected for the taxiway is around $20 million. The good news is that the FAA in principle has agreed to fund this taxiway over a period of time. In fact, phase 1, which is the environmental assessment, the FAA has already set aside funds for doing the phase 1, which will start shortly, hopefully by the end of this year. The next one is assessment of the existing conditions, market analysis, consideration of various alternatives, and development of the final draft concept plan. With this, I shall hand over the presentation to Mr. Quick, who has 22 years of experience in airports and general aviation consulting world. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahid, and good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. Again, my name is Matt Quick with Kaufman Associates, and it's been a privilege to work with city staff and airport staff over the course of the last several months to work on this East Side Development Plan, which is very important for the future growth and development of the airport. So I'm here today to just go through kind of a high-level presentation as to what we've studied as a part of the process and some of the draft findings of the process. So let me go ahead and get started with that. When we scoped this study process back several months ago, we came up with some key purposes behind why we wanted to go about doing this and why the city wanted to go about doing this. And obviously it was to be intentional with future growth and development opportunities of the airport. Like Shahid had mentioned, the airport's got about 120 acres east of the runway that's really right now pretty untapped in terms of what's over there. So being intentional with the future growth and development and maximizing the airport property boundary is key to the success of the airport moving forward. We understand that the airport is just that. It's an airport first and foremost. It must accommodate aviation demand, but we also understand there's certain areas within that east side development that may not be conducive for aeronautical or aviation activity, so we did consider some non-aeronautical development potential as well, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And again, it's really to just provide the airport and the city with guidance regarding the future development of the facility. We understand that this is just a plan. It's conceptual in nature. There's a lot to be ironed out moving forward. Demand's going to dictate a lot of that. Safety will dictate some of that, but it does provide that roadmap, if you will, for future growth and development opportunities at the airport. And we, again, tried to tap into a lot of existing studies that's happened at the airport. The airports went through a strategic plan in the past, so we wanted to make sure and align this particular plan with a lot of the foundation that's been laid at the airport previously. And this study process concludes with a final report. We've pulled together a draft report so far. I want to present that to you guys today. The findings that you're going to see in this presentation come out of that draft report, and then we will finalize that document based upon any feedback or comments that we receive. And then there's also an airport layout plan or an ALP update that must be coordinated with the Federal Aviation Administration or the FAA as a part of that process, and that's currently in the works as well. Just to touch briefly on the study process, like Shahid had mentioned, we started this back at the end of 2022. We split this study into 3 phases. We had coordination meetings at those particular milestone dates, and I'll talk a little bit about the stakeholder group that was made up of those coordination meetings. But we did an initial phase 1 where we looked at the airport, we studied what was happening from an aeronautical perspective. We took a look at the surrounding areas adjacent to the airport and how it could tap into not just the aviation demand, but potential non-aeronautical demand as well. We did do a market analysis based upon aviation and non-aviation activity, and then we took a look at what types of aircraft could operate at this airport in the future. Obviously, we have an understanding what's occurring at the airport right now, but it's important to understand what types of aircraft could operate in the future, so we came up with facility planning criteria needs based upon that to kind of lay that foundation of what we wanted to do in the next phase, which was phase 2 of the study, looking at the development alternatives. And this is where we laid out several different concepts, if you will, for meeting future aviation demand while also considering the potential for non-aeronautical activity in certain areas of the airport. And then from that perspective, or from that stage of the study process and getting feedback from the stakeholders that made up the working group, we moved into that phase 3, which was the final phase of the study, where we actually pulled together a draft development concept, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. And we came up with a schedule in terms of the types of projects that would be needed to bring that development concept to fruition as demand would dictate over time. And then we would update that airport layout plan, or that ALP. The importance of that particular drawing, that's the drawing that the Federal Aviation Administration recognizes. This particular plan, it's local to the city. It's the city's plan, but the airport layout plan is the FAA drawing, and any future development of the airport that the city wants to seek federal grant funding assistance for, even state funding assistance through the Arizona Department of Transportation's Aeronautics Group, it needs to show up on that ALP. So this development concept has been translated onto that ALP, and that's what's going through FAA review right now. This particular slide gives you an idea of the area of the airport that we're talking about. Approximately 120 acres on the east side of the runway. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the airport. There's a single runway. All the existing development from an aviation perspective, all the hangars, aircraft parking apron space, the terminal area, the control tower, other businesses and operators are all located on the west side. And that area there's not a lot of space left to develop, so this plan is certainly timely in terms of looking at what could be done on the east side of the airport. Currently, right now, there's some navigational aid equipment, some weather equipment that's located over on the east side, but that can all easily be relocated to accommodate future landside development east of the runway system. As we got into the study process, this particular slide, we kind of started laying out how you would segment the east side of the airport based upon the aeronautical and non-aeronautical market assessments. Obviously, terrain is an issue. Utilities are an issue. So it's not always conducive to provide aircraft access to certain areas of the airport based upon terrain. There's certain grades that must be met from an FAA standpoint in order to allow aircraft access. So as we got into this study, some of the area to the northeast side, adjacent to Glendale Avenue, that terrain really starts to drop off, and it's not even with the runway environment further to the west. So it would make that area much more challenging to develop from an aviation perspective. So some of that darker color that you can see, we started to kind of look at setting aside that land for non-aeronautical demand over time. And then some of the lighter colors, the orange in particular, those are areas that are conducive for aeronautical development and activity. Like Shahid had mentioned, starting with a parallel taxiway, which is kind of the linchpin to serving the east side moving forward. But then there's certainly a lot of area that could be built up in a manner that would allow for aircraft access and activity, whether it be taxiways, aircraft parking aprons, hangar development, things such as that. So that's what this particular slide starts to bring into focus in terms of how we wanted to lay out the east side.
Go ahead.
Can I ask, is the lift station already there?
Yeah.
Mayor, members of the council, that is correct. It is there.
Okay, thank you.
And we do not plan on relocating that. We understand that that's a fixed utility that needs to be built around. So this is the draft development concept that we put together. And again, we went through several iterations, several alternatives where we looked at the particular opportunities that were afforded to them. We got a lot of feedback from the working group, which was made up of the transportation department, other city departments, economic development, the FAA, in particular, the Phoenix Airports District Office had personnel that were on the committee. The Arizona Department of Transportation and Aeronautics Group had individuals that were part of that committee as well. So based upon a lot of the feedback that we received through the various committee meetings that we held, this is the draft concept that we put together. And I know there's a lot on here, just as a kind of a precursor, that legend. I know it's probably difficult to see, but the yellow are hangars. They would signify hangar development that could accommodate aircraft storage and other types of aviation businesses. The red deals with airfield pavement, so whether it be a taxiway for aircraft to taxi on to and from the runway environment, or the larger expansions of red area would be aircraft parking apron space. The blue would be vehicle access, roadways and vehicle parking that could lend themselves to the hangars and other businesses. And then you see those different colored areas up to kind of the northeast side adjacent to Glendale Avenue. That is the non-aeronautical potential that came out of this. Based upon this draft development concept, we've set aside about 40 acres for non-aeronautical development that could accommodate, light industrial land use, flex land uses. We have about 2.5 acres that's set aside for what we would call a gateway commercial land use, some type of, higher activity, gas station, if you will, or something like that there at the corner of New River Road and Glendale Avenue. We've also got about 2 acres set aside for what we call ARF land use. ARF stands for Aircraft Rescue Firefighting. One of the discussions that came up during the course of this study process was the need for an additional fire station potentially, but not just a fire station that could serve the general locale adjacent to the airport, but also could be specific for aircraft activity. So this is not set in stone. We just wanted to take advantage of some of the land use potential right there adjacent to Glendale Avenue that's on airport property that could accommodate a dual use fire station, if you will, that could serve the community as well as the airport. So just want to be very clear that that basically this entire plan is draft and subject to change. A lot of it's going to be dependent upon, you know, private development and the city working with various entities as they develop the east side. But based upon the aeronautical and the non-aeronautical market analysis that was conducted, this particular layout would definitely accommodate some pretty significant aviation growth at the airport over the years, and it would also tie into some non-aeronautical that could be utilized as a nice revenue stream for the airport moving forward, and being able to also satisfy and accommodate some of the local land uses and economic development potentials that the city's looking at adjacent to the airport. So those are some of the highlights of the development concept. I'd be happy to answer any questions as we move forward as it relates to that. This just zooms in a little bit more on the non-aeronautical land use. And again, we had a sub-consultant on our team that did a very detailed non-aeronautical market evaluation and came up with, we feel like, is a pretty good intentional layout of what could be accommodated over there based upon the terrain and kind of the segregation of the aviation and the non-aviation demand, and how that could be split out into some of those different types of non-aeronautical land uses, dealing with light industrial, flex use, and so on and so forth. There's a process that the airport and the city would have to go through. Right now, like I'd mentioned earlier, this is an airport. The FAA expects this to accommodate aviation demand first and foremost, but with the understanding that there is some land that's just not real conducive for aeronautical development. So there's a process that the city can go through to release, if you will, some of this property for non-aeronautical demand moving forward. And the city and airport staff that we've worked with on this project is very familiar with that process and can certainly have those discussions with the FAA moving forward. I mentioned utility infrastructure earlier. This is obviously a key component. The taxiway is one key component to future development of the east side, but just as much so as the utility infrastructure. So there are certain components over there right now, the lift station being one, that we know that that's not going to be relocated. It can certainly be built around. But we also had a sub-consultant on our team that did some pretty significant utility analysis as a part of this process. So we understand that there's some additional utilities that would need to be extended into that area to bring it to fruition from the development side of the house. Some of that particular utility infrastructure is not necessarily eligible for FAA grant funding assistance, but there are obviously other methods to go about trying to get that, working with private developers, and I know the city can certainly come up with a plan to make that work over time. But we did spend some significant time in the study process outlining some of the utility infrastructure that would be needed from a water, sewer, electric standpoint to feed the east side to allow for future development opportunities. All that being said, we had a couple capital projects identified, the design and then the follow-on construction. You're looking at around $10 million to fully lay out the utility infrastructure as we had planned on the development concept to be able to maximize the east side of the airport moving forward. And there, like I said, there's more detail in the report as it relates to the layout of that. As I come to closing this presentation, this particular slide, I know it's difficult to see, but we took that development concept and we came up with a list of projects that would be needed to help bring that overall concept to fruition. So, you know, we split this into really 3 phases. We have a short term, the 1 to 5 year time frame, the intermediate term is 6 to 10 years, and then the long term is 11 years plus. There are some particular projects that would be needed sooner rather than later to really get this rolling. The taxiway, the parallel taxiway on the east side would certainly be one. So you'll see we've kind of phased that, possibly building the north portion of that taxiway sooner rather than later. That would allow for some of that initial development to start occurring based upon the aircraft access to that taxiway. We show some roadway extensions coming off of Glendale Avenue and New River Road that could feed the area further to the south. So you can kind of look through that list. You know, several of these are obviously demand driven with the need for the taxiway, aircraft parking apron space. We did not include the hangar development as particular capital project items. In talking with the stakeholder group and city representatives, we feel like in the kind of the trend you're seeing at airports this day and age is a lot of the private development getting involved with actually the building of the hangars and so on and so forth. But the city, through FAA and ADOT Aeronautics, there's certainly projects that are grant eligible that could help get the ball rolling, so to speak, in terms of starting to open up that area for future development, and then working with the private developers to come in and actually build hangars moving forward. So this just lays out kind of a snapshot of what it would look like to work on the aeronautical components, as well as laying out some of the groundwork for the non-aeronautical demand moving forward as well. Finally, this slide just speaks to some of the funding mechanisms that are in place. There's several. Like Shahid had mentioned, the airport is recognized by the FAA and ADOT as a significant transportation facility within the overall aviation network structure. So as that being the case, the airport every year receives entitlement funds through the FAA's Airport Improvement Program, or AIP program. So it gets those. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BILL program, you've probably heard of that. There's a significant amount of money that's been set aside for aviation use as a part of that BILL program. The airport sees BILL funding on an annual basis. At least it's supposed to go through 2026 right now. I don't know what it's going to look like beyond that point, but that's what the federal government has set aside for BILL money, and Glendale Regional Airport does see some of that as well. And then there's also FAA discretionary money, some of the larger, bigger ticket items that would go above and beyond the entitlement program and the BILL program. The airport and the city can work with the local airports district office through the FAA to help secure some discretionary funding for some of those bigger projects. A good example of that would probably be like the parallel taxiway. That's a pretty significant chunk of money. Would probably require some discretionary funding, and that's again a conversation for the airport and the city to be having with the FAA to help set that up in the years to come. And then the state also has a pretty significant aeronautics program and funding assistance through standalone state local grants through ADOT Aeronautics, as well as ADOT Aeronautics will come alongside and help match any federal grant that the airport receives as well. So a lot of the projects that we lay out as a part of this particular plan are eligible for grant funding assistance through the FAA as well as ADOT. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, this is the slide. I thought it was a little earlier on, but it's at the back. So like I had mentioned, we had 4 committee meetings as a part of this study process, and we had a really good group of people. We had good participation throughout those 4 committee meetings that met at the initial stage, as well as the 3 phase milestones that I talked about during the study process. So economic development, the transportation department as well within the city. The city manager's office was very engaged with this, and then we had representatives from the FAA and ADOT Aeronautics as well. So we really leaned on that working group over the course of this study process to help formulate this draft development plan that we bring before you today. And with that being said, that's all I have. I'd be happy to help answer any questions that you guys might have. Thank you for your time.
I've got 2 or 3 for you. That very last one that you didn't mention the airport commission. Were they involved?
They were involved. I know this particular plan has been coordinated with the airport commission. I know Matt Smith is here, and earlier this year that took place.
Okay.
Mayor and the council airport commission was involved. This plan was presented to them a couple of times, and they're supportive of this plan.
Okay, all right. That was the one question. There's what it looks like about 40-foot, 45-foot difference in elevation between the north end of the runway and the south end, if I'm reading this map correctly. I'm curious, why is the fuel farm being moved? What is the purpose of that?
Mayor and members of the council, it's not so much moving the fuel farm, it's creating a new fuel farm on the east side. So the existing fuel farm on the west side would remain, and the intention would be to build a new fuel farm as the east side develops. That way the trucks aren't transitioning back and forth from one side of the airport to the other. So as development would dictate and come to fruition on the east side, I could certainly see a need for future or additional fuel storage capacity at the airport to accommodate aviation activity, and the thought would be to put another fuel farm on the east side.
Okay, and I totally agree with that, but I'm going to make a recommendation that may not be overly popular. I think that needs to be set up potentially, and I'd like the airport commission to weigh in on that, but potentially maybe a co-op fuel station, something where the pilots have an opportunity to co-op to get their fuel cheaper. We have pilots on a daily basis flying to other airports to buy fuel. And that's a waste of money for the city. I'd like to be able to figure out a way to keep them there. If you're going to add another one, maybe that's the potential for setting up a co-op, something like that. Just a thought. And then my other concern or thought, on the north end of the new area, that purple area, I know that that's probably being looked at differently because it looks like it's about a 20-foot lower elevation. At the same time, the biggest triangle part, I don't know how to describe that, that's basically the furthest south. Yes, that area right there, the purple. No, right there. I don't know why we wouldn't try to figure out a way to have people dump dirt in there, compact it, sheep's foot it, get it ready, because if we don't do that, we're literally cutting off the opportunity for the airport if we're not allowing airport traffic, hangars, things like that at that higher elevation. That'd be my only thought is I'd kind of hate to see us develop that into something else that isn't directly airport use, when if we want to grow this, and I believe the city's going to continue to grow, why we wouldn't make that opportunity for the city to increase at airport. If that makes any sense.
Yes, we can certainly take a look at that. I know, so you're talking about that 17-acre area, I believe, and we've got the roadway structure coming through it. That's what kind of segregates that significant drop in terrain to where it would make it less conducive.
There used to be some homes right in that area, but my thought is if that was raised up to where you didn't have to worry about, the 1,000-year flood, why wouldn't we do that, which could affect, you could put a lot more hangars. I think I counted 44 hangars, I believe, that you're contemplating putting in. You could put in another 10 very easily with that. Just a thought. But
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions. Thank you for the presentation. First and foremost, I would assume, just to say first that multiple times when we've visited our DC lobbyists with West Valley Partners, we've been told that the biggest threat to Luke is general aviation. So that is, at least for me, the highest level of concern is that I wouldn't want to do anything to put at risk the mission of Luke Air Force Base. It's a huge economic engine in the West Valley. Not just that, but it is a huge thing for the safety of our country. So I would imagine, I don't know where Luke is or that this has all been reviewed by Luke and that they're okay with this and they don't think that there's going to be encroachment with this much more general aviation traffic in that area.
Mayor and the council, Luke has a representation on the airport commission, so they are fully aware of this plan. But per se, we did not go to the Luke and presented that plan to them. But their rep is fully aware of this plan and has raised no concern.
Have there been discussions with Baker Donaldson, or the West Valley Partners lobbying firm?
yeah, if I could interject just a little bit, being that I've been flying out of there for 20 years, the vast majority of the traffic flying in and flying out, if you were landing south, which is runway 19, if you were landing south, you're going to be doing what they call left traffic. So you would be flying along the runway with the airport to your left, and then you would be on downwind base and then final. Same way if you're landing opposite direction, the airport's going to be on your right side. They rarely ever put any traffic on the west side of the airport. Occasionally, they may call for that, but there's enough separation. That's not the issue with Luke. The biggest issue with Luke that they've been very clear about, is that the pilots need to talk to Luke. They have to communicate. Yeah, they're Class D airspace, we're Class D airspace, but we're just as close to Goodyear Airport as we are to Luke. Luke's potential issue, and this will be decided in the future, is going to be what Peoria's trying to do with an airport up there.
Right. And
That's going to be
Deer Valley's also expanding, significantly expanding their operation, so.
right. But right now, I mean, we certainly will go through that exercise. I don't see an issue with Luke at all. We just have to let them know what we're doing. As long as we maintain that air traffic control, the Class D airspace, I personally, and if I'm saying anything out of line, correct me, but I see no reason why Luke should be concerned about any of this now, as long as everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're all licensed pilots. I don't see a big problem there.
Mayor and the
I
council.
have more, Mayor, I have more questions before you
Okay.
move on to
Did you want to
something else.
finish up on that
Yes.
question?
So if I may say, FAA is also aware of Luke, and they are providing a technical oversight to make sure there's no conflict, and they visited the site and they were okay with it.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure that was part of the discussion. My second question is, there's a draft report. Can we get a copy of the draft report? I would like to read the draft report. Can someone send, I prefer to read the reports myself, always, so I would like to have a copy. I don't know if anybody else would, but I would like to have a copy of the draft report. Is it finished?
Mayor and the council, we are waiting for this one. The report is ready. We can send you after this ASAP.
Very good, thank you. My next question is, I was going to ask about the Aviation Advisory Commission. The mayor got that. Next question, cost. So, I don't have this in my CIP, but in addition to whatever FAA's cost going to cover, basically what you're showing us, what is the total cost estimated, at least right now? There's got to be some dollar amount. And how much of this improvements would the FAA infrastructure money cover?
Mayor and the council, the alternative which you see, the final development cost, that cost as of today's value is about $52 million. Most of this can be covered by grant funds, but leaving aside the utilities, which is about $10 million, which mostly will be the city responsibility. As I said earlier, FAA has agreed in principle, which is a major cost of the east side taxiway, and last week they visited the site, they surveyed the site, and they were very supportive of the plan. And that's about $20 million. So that's in the phase. I think we spread it over four years. Phase one is the environmental assessment. They already set aside the funding for the environmental assessment. We are only waiting for the federal FAA to approve the airport layout plan, and then we hope to start the environment by the end of this year. All the aprons will be covered by the grant fund. The access road will be covered by the grant fund. So majority, leaving aside $10 million, rest mostly will be covered through grant funds.
Okay, thank you. So you said, did you say 200 million total though? That mean the hangars and all the other infrastructure would be, that's not included in what the FAA. So the total anticipated project cost, and is that reflected in our current CIP, or is that something we're going to be adding in?
So Mayor and the council, once the airport layout plan will approve, we will include this into our airport ASIP, CIP. The taxiway is already included in the ASIP. That's why because FAA has committed to support that the construction of the taxiway. But rest of the development as we go along, we'll include them into our.
It'll be phased in through the CIP?
Into airport capital improvement program.
Very good. Last question is about the fire station, and I know this has been a kind of an ongoing discussion, and I know Councilmember Clark and I both advocated for funding to at least start on the western area fire station. And I mean, this isn't the first time that I've seen that it seems like kind of a done deal that somebody's decided that this is where the fire station is going to go. And I know when we were presented with location propositions we were showed the hexagons, is that what they're, and this was outside the hexagon of where the response needed to be. So and it's basically, you've got it in the 6 to 10 years on slide 10, it's showing fire station in the 6 to 10 years. I did not see our fire chief and as one of the people that was a stakeholder, but how far down the road is this discussion about putting the fire station here?
So Mayor and the council, the fire chief was involved in the discussion of the placement of the fire location. This is not a done deal. Just the fire chief has to make a decision at the end and get your approval in case the final decision is that that's the best location. So we're just reserving a site, but that's not a done deal unless they go through all the process, because if we don't include in the airport layout plan, it goes the federal approval, then down the line we may have some difficulties to put that back in. So we just place it as a placeholder. We can take it out anytime, as we move forward, depending upon whatever is the final location
Okay.
for the fire station.
Very good. And then can you show me on this, on one of these slides, where would the fire station, if that was the chosen location, where would it be?
You see the mouse
The purple area.
up in the northeast corner, right adjacent to Glendale Avenue.
Purple dot in amongst the green.
Oh, the 2.2 acres?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, the 2.2 acres right adjacent to Glendale Avenue is what we've got set aside just on this draft
Okay.
concept.
Okay, thank you.
Art.
Thank you, Mayor. As to be expected, we're on the same page on several issues, so I'll go through my concerns on those quickly. I was surprised to see that Luke Air Force Base wasn't listed as a key stakeholder, and they don't actually, as far as I know, have a seat on our aviation commission. They probably do send an observer from Luke to see, to watch what we do in that commission and check for impacts. But I really kind of think that I'd like to have a more secure presence from a resident of Luke on this, as a stakeholder on this going forward. Your report also sets as one of the goals is for our airport to be the premier general aviation airport, and I'm not exactly sure in what term. How does premier apply? Does that mean we're going to be the busiest in the valley, or we're going to be, we're going to have the best carpet and the best, finishes in our, our restrooms or whatever? What is it to be the premier general aviation airport?
So Mayor and members of the council, that actually was a quote from the strategic plan that we were not involved with, but I think it's just identifying the airport as a key transportation hub within the FAA's aviation network and system, and being able to accommodate the full fleet mix of general aviation activity, from small single engine piston aircrafts like it does today up to mid to larger size corporate business jets, which it also sees, but making sure the east side accommodates all that type of activity.
Okay, thank you. I didn't catch what report that was first found in, or you found it in?
It was the airport strategic plan.
Okay, our airport strategic plan.
Correct.
Okay, so I need to find out internally what it means to be the premier then. I don't know if Mr. Abbas has anything to
Yes.
provide. What does premier
mayor-
mean to you, or?
The mayor of the council, I don't recall exactly the word because, I've not really, I read the report, but I don't remember. But the one thing which I want to mention, FAA is very sportive, and they think that's one of the prime area for the airport, which can support a lot of the aviation operation in this part of the valley. And that's why they were partner on us, and they especially came here last visit and they survey all the area, and they're still very supportive that this airport has a potential to develop, further and grow. Just the location and the accessibility where this airport is located.
And part of my concern there is if premier is defined, includes the volume of air traffic, general aviation traffic we have, then that does, potentially, I think, impact Luke Air Force Base. And we ought to make sure that they're standing with us on whatever our long-term plans are for our airport. So that finishes that question. How does the possibility of Peoria building their own airport impact our long-term plan?
So Mayor, I can start with that. Mayor, members of the council, that's a good question. I know that there's a feasibility study that's been done, and there's a lot of aviation demand in the Phoenix area, and taking into account Deer Valley, Goodyear, Glendale, other airports. I think it's foreseen that an airport in Peoria could certainly accommodate additional growth and development within the aviation structure, and I don't know if that would necessarily impact Glendale in terms of being able to already have an existing facility and a structure that's there with a runway. And like I said, the parallel taxiway is kind of the key to allowing for that development opportunity on the east side. But there's general aviation it's a huge component of the overall aviation network. So anything from the small single engine piston aircraft up to the larger corporate business jets, we see a lot of that. And in particular, the biggest growth segments within general aviation is the corporate business market. So we see a lot more of that activity from the standpoint of turboprops and jets, which typically require more space on the ground from a hangar and aircraft parking apron structure. So a lot of the developable land around the various airports in the valley, I think a lot of that is catering to more of that type of activity, which is going to be eaten up a lot quicker, if you will, than what would be required of the smaller general aviations, just based upon the market demand analysis that we've seen kind of with the switch over to the larger GA moving forward in the fleet mix.
Thank you, and that kind of matches my thinking too, is that what we might see at our airport is more of that corporate and entertainment jet type, and artists and that sort of thing, given the proximity to our entertainment district and also to the development we're doing in our western area out to the 303 and all. And I just want to make sure that if that's our line of thought, that we're keeping that premier. Now I realize that with our mega events, which we now have several, then we do have some days or weekends where we're going to have a lot of traffic. We already have that happening. So we have, and that certainly could impact Luke, but managing them around a Super Bowl or a Final Four or something like that, the BCS bowl game, or if that's still a thing, that is something that I think could be managed around. But if we have a across-the-board increase in small planes, coming and going day in and day out, that may make it, that may have a different impact on Luke, and I'd like us to be sensitive to what that would be. Several years ago, there had been talk about and land donated for a second runway, and I know that's been discussed over the years, but now that we're seriously considering a plan for that eastern area, and if this is the plan, it looks like we're not planning on a second runway during the life of this airport. Is that accurate?
Mayor and the council, FAA has raised this issue with us, and they think in the near future they don't see a requirement for a second runway at this airport, And if they have to build a second runway, then first of all, it's difficult because of the lay of the land and the river across, So get that thing, and secondly, there'll be no land left for us to develop. So FAA has been involved in that, and they have concluded we don't need a second runway at this point in time, or in the near foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you.
I might add on to that too. Just when the FAA looks at a parallel runway, operations are the key, and typically you're looking at 150 to 200,000 plus annual operations to help justify a parallel runway, and this airport is not anywhere near that from a capacity standpoint. So yeah, we understand and recognize that this particular development option precludes or doesn't include a parallel runway, but the operations aren't there to justify one either.
Okay, thank you. I really did like the phrase that was in here about being intentional about future growth, and I mean that's not only important for us at the airport, that's important for us citywide. So I just wanted to say I like whoever's phrase that is. I like it a lot, and we ought to be doing that citywide. Not saying we aren't, but I'm just saying that that's really crucial. The non-aeronautical uses that were the space for that was mentioned. Does that mean they probably wouldn't have anything to do with the airport at all, or they just wouldn't be corporate? They wouldn't have on-site hangars and things like that?
Mayor, members of the council, the main definition of non-aeronautical is not afforded airfield access. So yeah, that area would not be conducive to aircraft access. Not to say that you could get some type of development that would help support aerospace or some type of aviation activity, but just not airfield access to the runway and taxiway environment. But a lot of times when you think non-aeronautical with airports, it's more commercial and industrial related, and not necessarily with any ties to aviation activity.
Okay.
And
So
Mayor
that
of the
would be
Council, if I
typical
may
of-
add, FAA has surveyed this area because they have to prove our airport layout plan, and they have concluded that that land is not conducive for the aviation uses. So they are going to make a recommendation to the federal FAA so they can approve our airport layout plan.
And to be clear, that's as the land is currently today. But if you did a backfill process and compaction, it could be, is that correct?
Mayor and the council, that's true, but the fill is so much that I think it will be a challenge, very expensive to make that fill and bring it to the level that was their observations. And of course, we're going to take another look and see what it involves.
Okay, the only reason I brought, I'm sorry, Bart, were you done?
Not quite.
Go ahead and finish your part and then I'll follow up.
Okay. So yeah, again, back on the non-aeronautical uses, so maybe an industrial park similar to the our industrial park that's on the north side of Glendale Avenue between Glendale and Northern, that it's airport adjacent but not airport dependent kind of a thing, and that maybe they have a airplane hangared over there and maybe they don't, but they're not necessarily flying in and out product or anything on a daily basis. Is that?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, that is correct. That's how I
Okay.
would perceive the non-aeronautical.
Okay, so, then in my thinking, it may not be something that the city needs to develop, and it might be something that land that we would potentially look at selling in the future to somebody who would then develop it, and whereas airport proper land and uses, I think we probably would be best off holding on to, but that's just an opportunity for how would we deal with that in the future. And then again, I was going to speak to the potential, not yet official or not cast in stone airport fire station site, and that's nice that we're being intentional about our thinking to the future, but again, I would like to reiterate that we'll get recommendations from our department on what the potential locations, I think, and their pluses and minuses, and it'll be up to the council to make a decision on that, I hope. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Phelps?
Mayor, members of the council, so just to follow up on a couple of the comments that are here, I think with regards, remember this first of all is a 30,000-foot level. There's so much detail. We needed to see whether there was really even feasibility of developing in the east side, and so our consultant has really come in and done a great job to kind of show what the development areas can be. We've kind of, from a city manager's perspective in our office, we've always assumed that even though there will be a tremendous amount of hopefully FAA money coming in, there are match dollars required. And so we've always looked at the extra acreage that really can't be tied in inexpensively to the airport, that the city controls that, could sell that off to a developer, and then that helps us with the match dollars to expand. I mean, that's just in concept. Obviously, that'll be up to the council as we mull this over. So that was really kind of the core idea was, could we take the 134 acres, a component of it, we could maybe bring in a master developer, develop it out. We use those dollars to help with our match funds. With regards to the product mix, and I think this was echoed by Councilmember Turner, what started prior to this happening is I went down and met with the city of Scottsdale with their airport administrator. The Scottsdale airport is one of the most successful airports of its type of anywhere in the country from a volume standpoint, and they are built out. In fact, they had just opened their last brand new hangar facility that city of Scottsdale had developed themselves. It's really adjacent to where their administrative headquarters is at for the airport. They are pretty well landlocked, and their demand for corporate jets exceeds what their capacity is. What's happened in the marketplace over the last decade is more and more the corporate jets are now able to fly across the water, either to Far East or over to Europe, which has expanded the size of the wingspan and increase the fuel capacity, which also means the tail fin has gotten much higher. So Scottsdale is recognizing that the real marketplace is having hangars that can accommodate the larger wingspans and the taller tail fins. We would have that ability here to kind of build right from ground up and spec it out to be competitive in that market. So again, this will be a policy decision the council want to move forward, but I think to do just light general aviation on that side may be a wasted opportunity, because the one thing that Scottsdale Airport has done is it's considered by the city of Scottsdale as maybe their single biggest economic driver for their community. And that's saying a lot, because Scottsdale has a lot of really positive things going on. And I'm not forestalling that we could be what Scottsdale Airport is, but I think we could certainly fill in the gap. I'll close with this. Their airport administrator told me that the physical location of our airport would make it, he believes, ideal to be competitive to find future development to come in and future users for it. He really liked where we're located at as compared to some of the airports that are more in the southern or far southwest part of the region. He thinks this is right along the freeway, a lot of supporting infrastructure. So again, what we asked the consultant to do is to say, first, is this even feasible? We're getting positive things back, and then we'll continue now, based on your feedback, to put more definitive action plans in place. Thank you.
Okay, you had a question?
Yeah. The ideas I'm going to throw out, I don't know if they're practical or not, because I don't fly and I know nothing about this, really. But one of the constraints for Glendale Airport has always been the length of the runway and its ability to accommodate larger corporate jets. And I know we're constrained by New River. You can only go so far, and then you're up against the river. But I have seen aircraft and airports where they have bridged over obstacles, whether it's roadways or rivers or whatever, to extend that runway capacity. I don't know if it's feasible, but I would certainly, and it's probably going to cost $10 million. It's going to cost an arm and a leg, but in terms of making our airport as viable as possible, I'd like to know if you've looked at that and if it's feasible at all. My second comment has to do with the idea that I've always felt it's necessary that there be a road that goes over New River that links the airport to the Westgate area. And I see no concept or even thought of creating such a link, but I think it would be a very attractive link were it to be developed, and people could avoid Glendale Avenue and make a link perhaps from the southern end of the airport right directly over to Westgate, especially if as Councilmember Turner alluded to, we attract corporate traffic for mega events or for concerts. Giving them an easy access over to Westgate would be very, very attractive to them. So I think that's another concept that perhaps we've overlooked or you've looked at and rejected. And if you have rejected, I'd like to know why. And thirdly, yeah, I'd like a copy of the draft report also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one other question. So, do we have data to show that there's a demand, or is this kind of a field of dreams concept? If we build it, they will come.
So, Mayor and the council member, FAA has the data. Our operations have grown. We never achieved 125, so we are doing 125,000 operations at the highest. So over a period of time, they are growing. But if we have more facilities, they will come, and that's the assessment, both from the city staff and from the FAA, that it has the potential.
So there's enough general aviation traffic to basically, and I think the mayor said 40-some hangars, something like that.
Well, that's what they're planning on adding.
Right. So there's enough general aviation traffic and enough people who own these, you know, corporate type jets that they're gonna, that we're gonna be able to get a return on the investment, I just, you know, I mean, we're a data-driven organization. I just want to make sure that that it's not a field of dreams, that we actually have data to show that the market, there's a demand for this in this market.
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, I'll step in on that too. The demand is very strong in the Phoenix metropolitan area for aviation. I would not consider this a field of dreams plan, but it is, however, a demand-based plan. So there may not be the activity today to support that, but that's why the city will work, you know, over time, whether it be with private developers or a master leasehold, to develop as demand dictates. And what we're seeing in the Phoenix area is the demand is very strong for the corporate business side of the aviation, kind of like City Manager Phelps had mentioned with Scottsdale, and the location of this airport and proximity to the stadium and to other things certainly would help, or would certainly be conducive to that type of development moving forward.
I just one more question. Thank you for that. I know Deer Valley Airport is putting in these larger hangars to accommodate this, you know, there's more and more of this larger corporate jet that they can fly further. They can fly across across water. Is that the only other airport that's expanding into this that has the ability, except for the Peoria, like you said, is right now it's just basically they're doing a feasibility study. They've made no decisions on whether or not they're going to pursue an airport. But are there other markets, other airports in the valley, in this area, expanding and offering this type of amenity also, or would we be basically, you know, the first ones to be able to offer this?
Mayor, members of the council, so great question. You are correct. Deer Valley is expanding right now, and they're limited on what they have space available to do, but they are focusing on some of the larger corporate hangars. Scottsdale's pretty tapped out, like we've talked about. You look at other airports, especially on the southeast side of the town or east side of town with Mesa Falcon Field, Chandler. Those airports are somewhat constrained because of runway length. Glendale has 7,150 feet of runway length. I want to get back to that with Councilmember Clark's question regarding what we looked at from a runway length analysis. But this type of runway length is very conducive to being able to accommodate those larger aircraft. So from the standpoint of what Scottsdale has to offer, Deer Valley has to offer, the runway length here is comparable to that, to being able to offer that. And there's other airports within the Phoenix area that just wouldn't be able to attract the larger corporate business activity because of the runway length.
Thank you.
If I could, I'd like to offer one thing. It was a comment Councilmember Turner had brought up. You know, what makes it a premier airport? Well, everything. You know, the close proximity to the freeways. As a pilot, you do your pre-planning. They want to know when they get here that there's something to do, someplace to go, that there's hotels nearby, easy access, rental cars, hotels. And we've been building all of that infrastructure for the last 10 years. I think now it's coming to the point where, yeah, we've got it, but if we don't have a place for them to store their airplane or work on it, or have the shops that can do the work on them, we'll never be able to grow. I think this is that thing that you run into all the time when you're trying to grow a business. You get to a point where you're really good at it, but in order to grow, you have to do a whole bunch more that maybe you don't need today, but you're certainly going to need tomorrow. I'm in support of it. I still wish that we could figure out a way that we could, on that north end, do some backfill. I mean, I know it's expensive to backfill, but I also know that trucking companies, grading places like that, actually pay to dump that fill. So, you know, is there an opportunity? I think so. It's something I would like them to look at. I'm not going to, you know, try to slow the process down, but once that's built out, we can't change it. That's the thing I'm looking at. Any other questions on this from anybody? Mr.
Yeah, most of the
Miller.
questions I had have been answered, but I just, along that line of thinking, my concern, I mean, I was happy to see that we're setting some aside for the development, because I see that as our offset. I mean, we have to consider the cost. This is not going to be cheap. It's going to be very expensive, and we need some offset. And I think that development area is what is going to be the offset, that we're going to need that. And I consider the idea of expanding the airport by making that more feasible for aviation. But we've also had experts tell us that it would be very expensive. I don't see us going double expensive to get it ready for aviation, and then not have the feasibility of having development possible because we've already used the land for aviation. So I think the plan is excellent. I really, all my questions were answered. I think they've done a great job of putting this program or this plan together. I think it's very feasible, and I think it's going to be a real big boon for the city of Glendale to make this happen. Thank you.
All right, and again, it's a concept, not the final plan, so. Anyone else? Okay, what do you need from us?
This was just an information item, you know, so if
Okay,
we just
great.
need your input to this one, we'll finalize and we'll send the draft report to the council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, city manager report.
Yes, and I know this is going to sound like I'm repeating myself, which I have been known to do on occasion, but I'm going to assure you this is not a repeat of my memory. If you recall, several meetings ago that I mentioned to the council in my report that Standard & Poor had changed our outlook from stable to positive, which is generally a precursor to an increase in our rating. And then at our last meeting, I mentioned that Fitch had confirmed a AAA rating for that as well. Well, to join the fray, there's 3 rating organizations. The final one is Moody's, and we've just received an upgrade on our general obligation bonds, and we've gone from a A1 to a AA3 rating. But I wanted to read just a couple things that they actually wrote in their report. So this is the rating agency's report, and it says in quote, "The upgrade of the issuer rating to a AA3 reflects the strengthening and diversification of the city's economic base, including significant new industrial and commercial development and expanded employment and tax-based growth, which has accelerated in the last few years beyond our expectation." That's the part that really jumped off when we read the report. "The economic expansion has materially increased the city's revenue base and property wealth measures. The upgrade further reflects strengthened financial policies and practices, including minimum reserve policies, 10-year capital planning, and increased funding of retirement liabilities, which have combined to support a materially improved financial position and reduced leverage. These improvements are social and governance considerations respectively, which are drivers of this rating action." And so I hope that the 7 of you at this council, you are so much a part of this, and they really called out how important establishing policies are and showing the restraint of doing that. But it's been a while since I've seen a rating report be as positive and so clear as to what's been happening here in Glendale. And again, so glad to give that report. I think we've covered all 3, so I may not be giving you another upgrade for a while. But again, congratulations. This is certainly good news for the city and for our citizens. And that concludes my report.
All right, but before you hang up on me, it was a AA3?
Vicky, go ahead.
It's AA3, that's correct.
Yeah.
You have to go look at members of the council, you have to kind of look at their rating scale. You would think like A1 was above AA3, but that's not correct. It goes AA3, AA2, AA1, and then AAA. So on their rating scale. So from A1 up to AA3 is an upgrade.
Okay. Well, so we got room to grow, get better.
And we still have room to grow.
Okay, very good. City attorney's report.
No report, thank you.
Council items of special interest. Mr. Baldenegro.
None.
None. Councilmember Clark. Council items of special interest.
Nothing, thank you. I was just thinking of something else.
Council
Thank you,
Melner.
nothing.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Council Tomachon.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Councilmember Turner.
Not today, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, Mayor, I do have one.
Okay.
A longtime Glendale resident who lived in my neighborhood passed away. Al McCoy, who is probably Arizona's most famous sports announcer. And I was wondering if we could start the process to rename a park in my district with a basketball court, which would be New World Park, and name it and dedicate it to Al McCoy. Thank you.
I think that's a wonderful idea, and I'm sure that has to go through the parks, but I think it's a great idea. I really do. Yeah. Okay. And I don't have anything at this time. I'll make my announcement tonight. So can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
I have a motion and a second to go into executive. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. Here's your ayes have it. The motion carries. Council meeting is in recess.